Okay, in this video, I want to focus on another aspect of Schleiermachers' hermeneutics. In the last video, we talked about Ricoeur's understanding of Schleiermacher as being Kantian, and Kantian refers to Immanuel Kant, in the sense of elaborating universal principles of interpretation that apply not only to specific regions or domains, the classical, the biblical, the judicial, and so on, but Schleiermacher was interested in elaborating universal principles of interpretation that will apply to every type of text possible. Okay, so he's Kantian in that sense. Kant was interested in universal, in things that are universal to everyone. When it comes to our experience of the world, we all experience things in terms of space and time, in terms of causality. So Kant's mind is impersonal. Okay, Kant was interested in the universal. Even his ethics, the categorical imperative is everything is universal for Kant. On the other hand, so part of Schleiermacher's hermeneutics is Kantian to that extent that Schleiermacher was interested in the universal, in elaborating universal principles of interpretation, which no one before him had done. On the other hand, Schleiermacher was anti-Kantian, and by anti-Kantian, Ricoeur means romantic. Schleiermacher was part of the romantic generation. Think of Shelley in England, Shelley and Keats, Wordsworth. These people they celebrated what was unique to the creative artist. And in Germany, you have Goethe and other great romantic figures. Schleiermacher is part of the romantic generation, which celebrated, praised the genius, the creative genius. And the function of the interpreter was to get at that unique experience. Okay? So, for Schleiermacher, yeah, it is true that he was concerned with the universal in the sense of elaborating universal principles that would apply to any text. But he didn't want to stop there. I mean, the ultimate goal of interpretation or hermeneutics for Schleiermacher was to get at that unique experience of the creative genius. Think of Shakespeare. It would be considered the greatest of all the creative geniuses. So you want to what was going on in Shakespeare's mind? What was that experience? For the Romantics, the mind that they're trying to get at is this creative unconscious that is at work in the gifted individual. That's what they want to get at. They don't want to stop with the universal, with elaborating universal rules. They want to get to the subjective, the uniqueness of the creative genius. So that's what Schleiermacher, his hermeneutics, is about. So Schleiermacher's hermeneutics is both Kantian and anti-Kantian or romantic at the same time. It's romantic. The way Schleiermacher put it was, the way, this is quoting Schleiermacher, the task of the interpreter is to understand the author as well as or better than the author understood himself. That's a pretty big task. So if you're trying to understand like Shakespeare, you want to get it to somehow recreate this genius at work in Shakespeare's mind, but somehow to understand Shakespeare better than himself. That's a big task. So, but on the other hand, Schleiermachers' hermeneutics is critical or Kantian to the extent that it wants to elaborate universal principles of interpretation. And what's the point of these rules? Well, it's to overcome misunderstanding. One of the very famous statements of Schleiermacher is that hermeneutics occurs when there is hermeneutics when there is misunderstanding. That's a quotation from Schleiermacher. When you're reading a text, and the more ancient the text is, the more this is true. Schleiermacher says misunderstanding is not some rare event, something that occasionally happens. No, misunderstanding is what normally happens. It's a lot of work to really understand what an author is saying, and that was when Schleiermacher is trying to elaborate universal principles of interpretation. That's what he's doing it for the sake of overcoming misunderstanding, which is the normal thing that happens when you read a text. So I'm going to stop at this point, but the main point at this right now that Ricoeur is trying to get across is that for Schleiermacher's hermeneutics is characterized by both a Kantian or critical aspect and an anti-Kantian or romantic aspect. And the romantic aspect is directed towards the psychology. It's a psychological type of interpretation. It's directed towards the psychology of the creative genius. Now, Ricoeur is not against that, but he's ultimately going to argue that hermeneutics cannot stop at the psychological level. And we'll get to that later. In the next video, I will finish Ricoeur's discussion of Schleiermacher and then begin talking about Dilthey's hermeneutics, which what Dilthey is going to do is to expand Schleiermacher's hermeneutics and incorporate it into a larger field of study, which is the historical sciences, and which Ricoeur is all for. I mean, ultimately, that was a necessary step. But when we get to Dilthey, we'll talk about that. So I'm going to stop at this point.